Okay friends, one of the first things we need to do is safely raise and support the vehicle with the suspension hanging. Once we've done that, we're going to remove our 5 21mm lug nuts. Let's get the wheel off of here. Alright, so now that we have the wheel off of here, we have a nice clear view of our front strut. Something that I like to mention is you're going to have to remove your upper sway bar link mounting point here. A lot of times what happens when you try to take this off is it gets damaged in some way. Whether it's from trying to grab from the backside and ruining the boot, or even just stripping this out. One way or another, usually what it comes down to is you're going to have to replace the sway bar link at the same time. For me personally, I'm going to be replacing the sway bar link at the same time as the strut. That's just how I roll, and of course I do them as a pair with the other side of the vehicle. With that said, if you weren't replacing the sway bar link, what you could try to do is to use an Allen head, just like this, put it in the center where the stud is, hold that still, and then use your wrench to turn the 17mm nut to relieve the tension. But they usually strip out. So I've got my locking pliers holding onto the backside of the stud as tight as I possibly can. Now I'm going to turn the 17mm nut and try to relieve it. Easy peasy. So this is pretty much what happens when you actually grab onto the backside. You kind of ruin the boot. Now the next thing we need to do is remove the mounting bolt that holds our flex hose to the strut itself. It's always a great idea to spray down anything you're going to be removing with a little bit of penetrant. Awesome. Let's take one of our lug nuts, put it right onto the stud. That's going to help hold the rotor so it can't wobble around. Now the next thing we need to do is remove our bolts that hold our knuckle to our strut. I'm going to hold one side with a wrench and remove the other side. Just going to leave that in there for now. Do the same to the other bolt. Now the next thing we need to do is take something such as a bungee cord or whatever you might happen to have, but we need to apply a little bit of pressure on this so there's no way that it can come falling down and potentially put a tug on this or even your axle. I'm just going to take a nice bungee cord, come through in between the subframe and the control arm itself, and then I'll come up and around this and set that right in like that. Now we can go ahead and get our bolts out of here. We'll slowly let this down. Try to keep it controlled as much as possible. That looks pretty great, just like that. We'll have it stay. Now we need to get under the hood. Now that we're up underneath the hood, we want to pay attention to the direction that this plate is in. It's kind of like a little horseshoe, and we want it facing towards the front of the vehicle. Also, what I like to mention is let's go ahead and spray down these 3 mounting nuts right here with some penetrant. And something else to mention is you don't want to try to loosen this middle nut right here. Just leave it alone. Now for this portion, we're going to take off these 13mm nuts. You're obviously going to need a swivel of some sort or even a pivoting extension. Okay, so at this point, we only have 1 nut left. Something that you want to think about is that there's going to be nothing else holding the strut to the body of the vehicle. With that said, go ahead and reach down under there, hold onto the strut or hold it up with something else, so that way there's no way it can potentially hurt you, and let's get this off of here. There it is, friends. Okay friends, now it's time to install our brand new quality strut. Something that I want to mention real quick is you want to make sure that you have the mounting point for your flex hose located on the correct side. Once you're sure of it, let's go ahead and get this installed. Now coming from down underneath the vehicle, we're just going to come right up and we're going to try to line up those studs with the holes in the strut tower. There we are. Let's go ahead and start on all of our nuts. I always like to use a little bit of thread locker, but we'll call it your prerogative. Now we're just going to bottom these out. Don't make them too tight because we're going to be torquing them, but before we can do that, we have to have a couple more steps involved. I put a little bit of thread locker on my bolts that are going to be holding the knuckle to the strut. Let's go ahead and get our bungee cord out of the way. Lift this up. Now we'll line it up with the holes. These bolts are going to have to come through from the rear of the vehicle towards the front. Start with whichever one's easiest for you. Start on those nuts. Snug them up. I like to use a little bit of copper never seize where the bolt's going to be for the flex hose. Let's get the flex hose situated, start in that bolt, and then we'll snug it up. Bring this over, line it up with your hole. Start the nut on there. We'll bottom it out, and then we'll torque that to 55 foot-pounds as well. Torqued. Now we're going to go ahead and torque these bolts, get our socket on there, and of course our wrench. Torque these to 166 foot-pounds. Torqued. Let's get our lug nut off of there, get the wheel up on here, we'll bottom out the lug nuts, and then we'll torque them to 76 foot-pounds. All right, let's torque them in a crisscross manner. Torqued. So now with the entire weight of the vehicle down on the ground, we're going to go ahead and torque these to 29 foot-pounds. Torqued.